Hey guys, so this is the tips for Liang Yue, and her banner is up. So definitely a character that you should consider pulling because she is not only one of the meta team right now, but her kit previously, when she released, everyone didn't really acknowledge her as a DPS, more as a sub DPS because she has so much utility like immunity, then she have defense up, she have rank up, she extend buff and debuff. So if you think that these are very good utility, which means if her damage start to fall off, however, the utility is still useful, which means her longevity in terms of relevance to the game will probably be pretty long. So definitely a character that you should consider pulling for if you have not gotten her yet. So for tips 1 is regarding her incantation. So focus only on one zone to trigger Justice Bane of all evil or Peace Bane of all evil. If you need to use incantation from the other zone, so here what I mean is that let's say if you want to trigger Justice, you got to want to use incantation in the red zone, but there are just some incantation in the green zone that you need to use because, for example, you want to refresh Flutter Page AP +1, or you want to use some buff in order to refresh the buff status. So what you want to do here is you first use incantation from the red zone. This will give you several red talents. Then they will start pulling the card from the left side, which is in the green zone, into a mixed zone between green and red. So when you use those incantation that's in the mixed zone, it's gonna give you a mixed talent. So it's half green, half red. So they are counted as 0.5 talent. So which means if you get 2 mixed talent, it's actually 1 red and 1 green. So now if you have multiple red talents and mixed, you will be able to trigger Justice. If you are doing it like half each, so you have some red, then you have some green, and then you have 1 mix, that will instead trigger Swift Bane of all evil. And let's just say Swift is not the best in terms of damage output, so you would want to focus on Justice or Peace. Tips 2, prioritize S2 over S1. S2 is her buff. S2 will give her a buff which allows her to trigger S1 as follow-up attack, and because of that buff, it does 25% more damage. So yeah, prioritize S2 because essentially it is kind of like the same. S1, you do the attack. S2, you do S1 as an attack. Both of it would then trigger S1 as an attack, right? So tips 3, bring S2 into the mix zone. So why you want to do that is because of the buff extension. So if you are getting just 1 buff, that's going to trigger the follow-up attack just 1 time. If you put it into the green or mix zone, then you're going to get the buff for 2, okay? Which means 2 stacks, so you can trigger the follow-up attack twice. So that is basically doubling the damage. So it's very important for you to use that skill in the green or the mix zone. But mix zone is even better because it will take advantage of the red zone, which is rank up. So let's say you use a rank 2 buff. Now it goes to the mix zone. It goes rank up to rank 3, and now it doubles, right? So you will be able to trigger 2 rank 3 S1 SN follow-up attack, allowing Liang Yue to do over 1 million damage just from triggering that. Okay, so in relation to this as well, tips 4, if you have extra Vertin Moxie, so you do use First Melody and you upgrade S2 to rank 2. So initially it's rank 1, then you upgrade it to rank 2, drag it into the mix zone, and now it will be rank 3. So here are some examples I put there. If you are at P0, unfortunately, your zone is smaller, okay? Only 3 cards, and they are on the most right of your spell dock. So if Liang Yue buff is at the very end, unfortunately, there is no way you can bring it in. Okay, if you have higher portrait, then yes, but if P0, you will not be able to bring it into the mix zone. If Liang Yue's card is at the slot before the last, okay, so basically in the middle of the zone, right? Because the zone has 3 cards. So if it's in the middle, so you use card from the left side. So if it's in the red zone, you use card from the green zone. So that basically will bring the red zone closer and eventually overlaps, and then now you can use skill 2 in the mix zone. Again, this is a little bit contradictory to what I mentioned in tips 1, that you want to focus on just one side. So this very much depending on where the skill 2 is located. Okay, if skill 2, as in Liang Yue's buff, is on the green zone, then that will be perfect, because now you will be using incantation in the red zone and eventually drag the green zone closer, and then now you can use the buff in the mix zone. So that basically is not contradictory to tips 1. So you can trigger Justice Bane of All Evil, and you also get the rank up version of the single target attack as a follow-up attack, and you do it twice. So this is where you maximize the damage. However, unfortunately, because of RNG and where the card appear, so if in the situation where the buff card is indeed in the red zone and you want to drag it in, you have to use from the green zone. Then your decision will be, depending on the stage, let's say you're fighting against multiple enemy, then you focus on Bane of All Evil. Or else, if it's single target, then I would suggest you to focus on the S2. So don't bother about the Justice or Peace Bane of All Evil, just focus on bringing S2 into the mix zone. Because against single target, mathematically, if you trigger Bane of All Evil, maybe you do a damage from the range of 600,000 to maybe 800,000. But the S2, if it's rank 3, it's also going to do like 800,000, but it does it twice. So it's going to double up your damage. If you use a rank 2 version, it's not going to be 800, maybe 500, 4, 5, or 600, somewhere there, which still doubles up, is still more than that Bane of All Evil. Okay, so against single target enemy, don't bother too much about the Bane of All Evil. Focus on the single target attack. So the third example here is if the buff is on the other end of the zone, which is nearer to the middle side, then this is easy. You just need to use 3 incantation from the other zone, and then you will be able to get the buff into the mix zone. Okay, here also I forgot to mention, I'm assuming 5 AP, which is why you can use up to 4 cards and still able to use the buff. Okay, still able to use S2. And for the last one, if the card is like already in the middle, which is outside of the zone, right? Then you got to use 2 from the left side, 1 from the right side. But if it's middle but on the other side, then it's 2 right and 1 left. Then that will bring it to the middle. For tips 5, the buff from S2 is reduced after triggering the follow-up attack. So check the talents and use S2 right before triggering mass follow-up attack. So what I mean is that, let's say you have 4 talents. So using 1 more card will trigger the mass attack, right? So in that case, you use S2, you gain the buff, you trigger the follow-up attack, Bane of All Evil, then now you will do the single target follow-up attack, which is S1. And that will maximize your damage. Or else, once you use S2, for example, then you trigger the follow-up attack, the single target one. Only you trigger Bane of All Evil. Then by the time you trigger Bane of All Evil, the buff will already be consumed because you have triggered the single target follow-up attack. So yeah, do plan it that way in order to maximize the damage. For tip 6, the rotation is actually very simple. You just use all the incantation. Okay, because now the ultimate is triggered automatically. So which means in 3 rounds, you want to at least use 5 incantation, at least. But if you have more, just use all of them. If you have like 3, sometimes the game just gives you 3 of her incantation, use all of it. Okay, because each of her incantation is 2 talents, where if you use other units incantation, it's just 1 talent. So The more talent you use, the more Bane of All Evil you're going to trigger, the more damage that you will do. And for tip 7, her teammates. So first of all, He Guang, he is not yet released at the moment, but He Guang's main gimmick is removing his own card. So this will allow Liang Yue to generate more of her S1 and S2. It's still RNG, but at least the chances are higher now. Then a second thing is that he reduces the spell dot limit. So if you use first melody, it's 8. If you use unfinished tune, it will goes to 9. But with He Guang, when you use his ultimate, then he will reduce the spell dot to -2. So if it's 8, it will now be 6. And also the zone will then easily merge. Okay, if it's 6, then it's just side by side. So you need to use less card to bring the buff into the mix zone. But also note that if you are doing that, more cards enters the mix zone, then what you are getting is more mixed talent rather than the pure talent. Pure means totally red or totally green. So you get more mix. So if you get more mix, then Bane of All Evil damage will be lower. Okay, so there is a slight trade-off, but it's not that big of a trade-off. So it's still better that the zone is now nearer, and then you can bring S2 easily into the mix zone. Okay, and one more, he has AP +1 after he uses ultimate. If you use his ultimate when it is in the green or mix zone, then the AP +1 duration is gonna extend by 1 more. So having 5 AP will allow more cards to be used, which means more talent to be generated, and again more Bane of All Evil triggered, which means more damage. As for Flutter Page, similarly to He Guang, she also removes her card when she's channeling and has +1 AP as well. And one more thing is that due to her mechanics making use of crit and crit damage multiplier, you want to focus on triggering Justice Bane of All Evil. That's because based on the rate talent, you will get more crit and crit damage. So with Flutter Page and having that multiplier, this is how you are dealing so much damage with Flutter Page around. Okay? So if you have Flutter Page, focus on Justice. So like He Guang plus Flutter Page, focus on Justice as well. Now, 6 also have very good synergy with Liang Yue. And that's because the green and red zone will enhance 6's ability to apply and inflict and be able to actually inflict or apply all of the buff and debuff on Liang Yue and also the enemies. Like if his skills are on the green zone, then it's gonna be 3 rounds. If it's on the red zone, it's gonna get ranked up, and when you rank it up, it inflict even more debuff or apply even more buff, also for 3 rounds. So which means whatever the case is, you would want to at least try to go for the red or the mix zone for 6 incantation. And one thing to note here for 6 is that his S1 debuff can also inflict poison and burn if the enemy has already all of the 6 debuffs. So in that case, if you can do multiple 6 S1 previous round, and then this round you can do a few more, that will actually be quite a number of poison and burn stack on the enemy. So in that case, trigger Peace, Bane of All Evil. And that one potentially will be higher damage compared to Justice at that specific situation. For the next character is Mercuria. So Mercuria, with all the rank up going on, is very easy to get Cosmic Energy to the max stack. And one more thing is that rank 3 attacks receive even higher damage buff due to Mercuria's Euphoria. So there is a synergy, a good one with Liang Yue. One more I didn't mention here is Lopera. So Lopera giving more crit and crit damage together with Flutter Page actually creates a very strong team for Liang Yue. So that is also a potential. Alright, for sustain, you have 3 main options you can choose from. Marsha, Discipline Forge buff when she uses ultimate, also provide crit and crit damage, so overall it's very good. Then Keeperina, the thicker the shield, the more stats, the more buff, which is also advantage for Liang Yue. Then Fatutu directly enhances extra action damage, which also worked very well with Liang Yue. So these are the 3 options that you can choose from. So that's all for this video. That's all the tips for Liang Yue. Any more, it will be in He Guang's infographic, right? Where I will cover the rotation and everything and talk a little bit more about Liang Yue buff extension on He Guang's ultimate. Okay, so that's all for this video. Thank you very much for watching and have a good day.